Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of the StoryMode podcast, hosted on my channel, twitch.tv/BlindIRL. This will also be available in audio and video formats on YouTube and SoundCloud and other places, wherever you watch podcasts these days. So, some of you may know me. My name is Greg, but people here probably will call me Blind. And I'm joined with Mike. How are you doing today, man?
Hi, Blind. I'm doing fine. Some of
Just,
you might have
just
seen me
tell,
in Blind's chat. Yeah, I know. I'll tell people who I am.
just tell people a
Um,
little bit about yourself, man.
yeah. So as I said, you probably saw me in Blind's chat. I am a computer scientist, software engineer who loves video games and loves making them. So yeah, I guess that's all about
Uh,
me.
Yeah, and we're also joined with Lewis, aka LRFLEW, which is kind of the hardest name to wrap your head around in the world, so we're just going to call him Lewis. Lewis, how are you doing today, man, and what do you do?
I'm doing pretty well. So, yeah, you can also see me in Blind's chat, sometimes more than Mike, even. Uh, and so, yeah, I'm studying computer science. I make games occasionally, do game jams and stuff, work on open source projects. I do whatever.
Well, that's awesome. So, for those of you who don't know what's going on here, we are the Story Mode podcast, and what we have done over the past month or so, apparently nobody can hear anybody. Is everybody just broken?
No, I
Like,
think they
I'm
can
looking
hear
at
you
chat.
guys, but not me. Can you guys hear me
Okay,
now?
let's just do a sound check real quick, just to double check that
Okay.
everybody's working here. Um, Awesome. Anyways, so over the past month, we have played through a game called The Beginner's Guide. I streamed it back when it first came out, and these two have played it, and we've all replayed it. And we're essentially just going to have a roundtable discussion about the game now. And I am desperately trying to keep this bastard from knocking over my microphone. I have a cat on my lap right now who's being obnoxious. So the basic premise of the game is the main character, Davy. I'm just going to pop up his last name here and probably butcher this. Davy Reedon. He's the designer of the Stanley Parable, is the main voice in the game. He's the narrator. He's what you hear in the background. He's what you heard in the trailer that you just saw. He sits down and basically says, I have this friend named Coda, who I met a couple years back when he was going through some mental issues. And Coda essentially would make like these little mini games that were anywhere from 15 seconds to about a minute to a couple minutes long at max. And he would just play through these little games, and he essentially is learning about this person and then later about himself through the depiction of these mini games. And I'm just going to pass this off to Lewis. Lewis, what did you think of the Beginner's Guide?
It's interesting because it's one of the few games I've played where I felt like the first time I played it, I understood it better than the second time I played it. Because
That's interesting because I had the same feeling. Go on.
Yeah, because it's like there's a lot of different layers, in particular the ending is very complicated to the point where when you start trying to look at all the little hints, they almost feel contradictory.
Yeah, I think that the main criticism I saw for this game in Steam reviews, professional reviews, and just other discussions is that the game, as you said, contradicts itself, but is a little bit pretentious and tries to be more than it is. I think that this game dips on some very, very interesting topics, things like depression, things like being a workaholic, creative issues. Anyways, Mike, what did you think of this game, The Beginner's Guide?
I'm just gonna agree with Lewis. I was so confused by this game, but even the first time I played it. But I think that's sort of like what they were going for, and I don't know. Like there's, as you said, there's so many different topics that they hit on and that they cover, and like I don't know. A lot of people say you can't even call this a game, but I think it is because you walk
It,
around and you do stuff. But I think what it is more is that it's a narrative experience, and that's why I really enjoyed it, and I also got confused by it.
it's like playing through an interactive film to
Yeah,
me. When you hear people talking about things like, oh, movies are going to be VR, it's like if movies are going to be in virtual reality, that's what this is.
yeah.
It's essentially a interactive film. You play through it, and the narrator talks to you. It starts off, and the games that Coda has, the very first game that he has that you play through at the very beginning of the game, is literally just um, the very first map is just a source map for like what's it called? Counter-Strike.
Counter-Strike.
That's the very first game that he plays. It's just you walk around in this source map, and it's the main character, Davey, talking about how it's a very normal source map. Aside from there was a few abstract objects, and this was very interesting to Davey because he felt that Coda was kind of expressing himself in the games, and that's as the game continues on, it starts to feel more like Coda is making those games about Davey and how Davey himself has problems. I'm just gonna hop onto the plot. I'm actually reading this.
Well,
off
what's
of Wikipedia
interesting is that kind of at the very end, it almost reverses that. Like, it's not that the games are getting more about Davey, but that Davey is starting to make the games more about him.
Yeah, like he's maybe
that's where things got confusing.
Yeah, the last 3 minutes of this game, I actually almost wish that we had that available to show on stream. The last couple minutes of this game is like, I don't want to call it like a brain bending plot twist or anything, but here I'm just gonna read off the plot off of Wikipedia just so that people are all on the same page. The concept of the game is trying to understand the nature of a person based on exploring documents through their computer. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to meet this character via essentially rifling through their stuff.
Yeah.
Or documentation, or knowing the person in the first place. The game is aided by David's narration, just because I'm scared about pronouncing his last name. It looks to understand a game developer named Coda, whom Davey had met in a game jam in 2009. Coda is considered anemic, having created numerous strange game ideas, which subsequently deleted all of them or stored them away in forgotten places. The player explores these games, most of them being so-called walking simulators developed from 2008 to 2001. Now, one thing that I've wanted to...
Yeah.
Sorry, to 2011. I don't know, I can't read. One thing that I've wondered is, do you guys think that Coda's a real person? Or is Coda, like, perhaps a name for Davy's
That's a
depression?
tough question. Because I was just thinking about that. Clearly, if there is a Coda, his name's not Coda. But at the end of the game, they do say 4R. And I don't know, like, whether this is meant to be inspired by a true story then, or if, like, there's more truth to it than fiction. I don't know.
It almost makes me wonder if Coda, the character Coda, is perhaps like a name for his depression.
Yeah,
maybe.
I mean, it is a really weird sort of setup, because as you're playing through the game, at least for me, that was it. I kept on thinking, like, is this really like a game he got off of someone else who sent it to him to show, or like is it just done for the story for the game? So like maybe this never actually happened, but it's just discussing the possibility of what game developers go through and like all their feelings and stuff that's going on. So, you know, because if you look at the credits for the game, there's a lot of developers that were involved with this. So, you know, the whole thing, all of those games could have been written just for this specific discussion of things that happen to game developers a lot.
I almost feel like that this game could be about creative expression and issues with being creative.
Yeah.
I mean, what you're saying about maybe Coda not being a person, but that, you know, feeling of depression, would explain another issue I had with the game, which was towards the end when it starts referring to the machine and all these problems. You end up with almost two different Codas. The character that the player plays as, who's talking about, like, you know, creating these games is very difficult, and then the machine, which is actually creating the games. And it was sort of interesting to see that it sort of split up and didn't have a consistent answer to who was representing Coda.
For people who don't know it, you quite literally find a machine in one of the mini games, and it almost seems like the machine itself is the creation of the games to me.
Well, I mean, they kind of explicitly say that. I mean, at one point, one of the guys says it calls itself Coda.
Yeah, it's the machine that's creating these games. So that actually just drove home my thought of perhaps Coda is just like a name for his depression or something. Anyways, Mike, we haven't heard too much about what you have to say so far, and I know that you have a lot of notes. So why don't you give us a little spiel
Yeah.
on what you think?
So I'm just gonna continue on what you guys were just talking about with Coda. I think that was like when I got to that part of the game, when I was playing it for the first time, and again, like the more you play this game, the more you can think about it, and the more you get into your own head about it. So it's just
Yeah.
I might just be completely missing out stuff, but like it really broke the fourth wall for me, and it kind of ruined the experience for me when, first of all, it talks about Coda, about the developer who you don't link with at all as a player. Then it moves on to having those games where you are Coda, and then you are, as when playing as Coda, you say, I'm broken, I can't make any games anymore, and then it goes on and says, I actually think the machine that drives me is broken, right? And then it moves on to the machine, which is Coda, and it's like
Yes.
three different representations of Coda, but when played in succession, one after another, it really breaks the fourth wall. It really distances you as a player from the game, and it just, for me personally, it caused so much confusion about the game, and like trying to think what was the message that's trying to be said, but also, again, is this a message from someone? Is this their thinking of how certain developers think? And then for some things, it then hits back home as, you know, trying to make games and thinking about games and having the same feelings myself. It's kind of, again, confusing, you know?
Like,
I mean, a lot of this might be explainable by kind of the end game, because at the very end, one of the things that Coda, which is being represented by text on the wall, says is basically, stop changing my games, which almost kind of brings up this idea that maybe what you're seeing isn't actually real, and you're seeing it through a lens, and you have to try to interpret it. And that's a lot of where my confusion came from. It's like,
well,
what's supposed to be real? What's supposed to not be real?
Exactly.
Lewis, when he's saying stop changing my games, throughout the entire game, there are points where you will hit a impassable wall because of various things that happen in the game, such as, for example, in that first in I think it's the second mini game. When you're in the spaceship and you come into the labyrinth, it's like, oh, I'm just going to skip you past this. Or later on in the game where there's the invisible labyrinth that keeps resetting and sending you back, and it's like, oh, this is going to take a very long time for you to brute force your way through, so I'm just going to give you a bridge. I kind of thought that's what it meant by
Well, what's interesting about that, because
changing the
when I
games.
played through it a second time, I actually kept track of that. And
Yes.
there's basically 3 times that last level where he has to, skippy past it. The invisible maze,
the invisible maze,
the lever,
number,
the combo puzzle, and the
impassable door.
impassable door, yeah.
Yes.
And that's basically, that 3 just about doubles the number of times it actually happens in the game. Because there's skipping
Really?
the labyrinth, there's getting you up the stairs, and there's actually ending the house game. And that's about it.
Because what upset the Coda character in the end of the game was him showing the games to other people, being like, these are amazing, like, this guy's work is beautiful, and then he got mad.
But even so,
So-
there's actually one more quote that actually emphasizes my point, which is, let me see if I can find it in all of my notes.
You need to show your notes to the camera, because your notes are
Yeah,
pretty
do it.
Oh,
impressive.
I
do
have
it.
just an impressive page of notes, but there's like 6 of these, so I have
those
quite
of
a few
you-
of these.
To those of you listening to audio, if there is any of you, he literally has like 3 pages, like very tiny text, just like detailed. It's quite impressive.
Yeah, here's the quote I'm thinking of, because he says, quote, "Would you stop changing my games? Stop adding lampposts to them?" And
Yeah,
it's that last part, because like lampposts are a theme. Like a third of the way through the game, the guy
I think
says,
we need
"Look,
to
there's a
explain this.
lamppost."
I
He
think we need
adds
to
it
explain this to
to
people
every
who haven't
single
played the
line.
game, though.
Mike, go ahead. You explain this.
Yeah, okay, so like, was it the third or the fourth game that you go through? The narrator brings you to the end of the level and says, "Here's a lamppost at the end," and like, what does it mean? Let's just concentrate on this, and you will see it repeating at the end of every game, and it will mark the game, and maybe it meant something for
Specifically,
Coda.
he said Coda is going to start using these at the end of his
Yeah.
games. He
Yeah.
explicitly states that, and later on, he's like, "Why are you adding lampposts to my games?"
Exactly.
It's like, wait, what?
Yeah.
What's going on here?
And that sort of suggests to me that what we're dealing with is an unreliable narrator, that we can't take everything we see at face value. And that's where a lot of my confusion came from, because it's like, well, okay, what can we take as being truth? What can we actually assert?
Yeah, it's really, I don't know. It's kind of strange. It's who is this narrator anyway? That's honestly why I feel that the narrator himself is talking about a character within himself. Does that make sense? That was weirdly worded. He's discussing a name for his depression more than talking about a friend who's making things for him. He's making things for himself and getting mad at himself for changing them.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Maybe what he's trying to say is I've created these things, right? Let's just pretend for a second that him and Coda are the same person, okay? He's created these things and he's been throwing them out. And he's been slowly trying to go back in and look at them again. And he's starting to, and then suddenly decides, I need to show these to people. Shows them to people, and then gets mad at himself for doing that. And then his creativity leaves. Say, for example, the character Coda is his creativity. Coda leaves. I think that Coda is a representation for several different, I want to say mindsets. But like, Coda is his depression, Coda is his creativity, Coda is his ingenuity. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That totally makes sense, and it would explain a lot that happens, particularly in that ending part, and a lot of the more confusing lines, where Davey says, like, showing people your games makes me feel better.
Yeah, it's almost like he's, I don't know how to word this anymore because I feel like I've said it half a dozen times, but he's trying to, he's got something inside of him and he's just trying to let it out, and it's, because I've had that feeling before. For anyone who's done anything creative, you know that while you're creating it, it's like, oh, this is amazing for yourself, and then the moment you have to show it to somebody else, you freak the hell out. You know what I mean? Like, for me, one of the scariest parts of me being a little bit younger was when I wrote music. I wrote symphonies, I wrote various things, was showing it to my music teacher. That was the scariest thing in the world. And then I would get mad at myself later for showing it to my music teacher. Do you think this is a similar thing?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And then he's going back and editing it, and then getting mad that he's gone back and edited it. Now, because I don't want to like get us to a point where we're spinning our wheels here. What was a game, like a chunk of the game that stuck out in your mind? For example.
Personally.
Because for me...
Yeah, you go on.
Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, okay, fine. The one where he actually talks about when he met Coda, and he says he met him at a game jam, and he saw that game that he was making, and it was the game with you're in a cave, and then all the messages are like the balloons, like speech bubbles.
Yeah.
And
I remember that one.
He said, like, the game starts by saying this game is connected to the internet. These messages are left by other people. And so when I played it for the first time, I actually went through every single one of those bubbles that I could get to. And there's parts of it, like, if you actually go through the point that you want to see all the bubbles, you will end up getting to a part of the level where you jump off the main path and you cannot get back to the game. So you need to redo that level again.
Really?
Really?
Yeah, because when you get to the part where you have the cavern on top, and you have the sort of like a concrete part and grass, and you basically just walk down and go into the door, and then this is the door that cannot open. People are complaining about that and stuff, right? So back at the part where you have concrete, you can jump off that onto a lower platform, which is covered in grass, and there's a bunch of more messages there, and it leads you off around the cavern to read more of these messages, but there's no way to come back from that, or at least I couldn't find a way to come back from that.
You can actually get there? Because I was actually going to comment that there's a lot of notes you can't actually access. Because you can see
it was
a ton.
On one of the edges. It's like the only edge you can fall off in the whole game.
Yeah, because there's a lot of invisible walls in the game. It's like, I didn't realize that there was one you could fall off of.
With that whole room, I just wanted to finish it. I didn't like that room at all when I was playing through. And so I did everything I could to like skip everything and just stopped reading the notes because like, oh, these are dumb. Because they were like, I read like the first 5 or 6, and then after that I was like, ah, fuck it. And I just stopped.
Yeah.
But yeah, like after that, I, like in my second and third playthrough of the game, I just rushed through them because obviously I've read them all already. But it just really stuck with me. And the point where he says, "Is it possible, that these are the messages that the things that he's thinking about while he's making the game." And a lot of the thing that you're saying, that being his creativity and being afraid of showing stuff to people, is exactly what he thinks people are gonna say to him when they see the game, right? So there is a few of them that are positive, and like, this is amazing, this looks great, this is awesome, I'm enjoying this. But then there's a huge part of it they're saying, like, why the hell is this here? What is this? This is horrible. This makes no sense, and stuff like that. And it's just like a combination of greater negativity and like small positivity that like reaffirms the fact that he's happy with his game, right? Those are his inner thoughts that he thinks it's fine. But then all the negativity is like what he thinks people are going to say about the game and how they're going to react badly to it, and he's not going to be successful.
That room's essentially just walk aroundable Twitter.
Yeah.
It's Twitter, but you can walk around. It's like it's a mean Twitch chat, but you can walk around.
Yeah.
So, is that room literally just like what feedback is? Getting a response to your creativity. Because I also noticed in the game, after that room, things start to kind of go down towards the negative, right? Because after that room, he starts getting a little bit more like upset and concerned about various things.
Hold on, I have a list of the levels.
Lewis's notes come to the rescue.
Yeah, because that one was actually, it was called Notes.
Yeah.
And you're actually kind of right, because immediately after Notes was the escape rooms, and that was the one where you're in that room that has the bars and the well and everything.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the prisons.
Yeah, the prisons. So that came immediately after the Notes. Like, if the Notes are supposed to be April, then the escapes are May through June.
Wow. Once he starts making the prison games, he starts talking about how he's concerned that Coda is depressed. Like, what is going through this man's head? Why is he just making prisons? Why is he making small boxes? And that's where I when the first time I played through the game, I think I even said this on stream while I was playing it, and that was, damn, is he talking about his depression here? Like, that, I don't know. That's just the running theme that I have in my head about this game, is that it's all just like an issue with expressing your own creativity. Anyways, as far as games that stood out to you, something that we haven't spoken about at all yet today, and that's the one puzzle in the game. The mini game that stood out the most to me, you're in a corridor, and you come around a corner and you see a door, and your narrator Davey says, "This is new for Coda. It's a puzzle." And he's like, "See if you can solve it." And the puzzle's incredibly simple. You walk up to the door, you pull the lever down, the door opens. It's a dark room with another door behind it. You walk into the room, you kind of poke your head up, because the door takes a little while to open and close. You poke your head up, you flip the lever again, the door closes, you're trapped in there, and then on the inside of the door is another lever which opens the door behind you. It's a very simple little puzzle. And he says, "Now, see, this is the end of the game, because you're just like at a dead end, and that's where the game would end." And he says, "I'm going to remove the walls." He removes the walls, and you see this gigantuan, just a labyrinth of these dead-end rooms connecting to each other, all with the same puzzle, just like snaking up, and it's just this huge open thing. And he's saying,
for a mental picture on that, if you've ever played Minecraft and you've turned on X-ray, it looked just like that, where you can see the caverns, going. It's
in the trailer that we showed at the beginning very briefly. And it's just this amazing moment of holy crap. And because you start at the very end of this, there's no way that you'd ever see any of those other rooms, and you're not meant to know that. And I think that room states that there's all of this outside meaning to all of this. And like, hey, listen, this world is bigger than it might appear initially.
Well, it's interesting because Davey actually talks explicitly about that, because the one before it is the staircase that leads up to that really interesting room with all the text in it. And he was saying that one was about a dull exterior containing an interesting interior, and that one was a dull interior hiding an interesting exterior.
Yeah, he actually states that quite literally word for word to what Lewis just said.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's that moment in the game was just kind of almost mind blowing. It was like, whoa, what is going on here? Why why is he creating these games? Whether he's creating them for himself and he is Coda, or if Coda is creating these games, what does that mean? And it was at that point in the game that things kind of took a turn for like, what exactly is happening here? And after you get introduced to that puzzle, and I use the word puzzle very lightly, hence the
Yeah.
you encounter that a lot, and every time you encounter that puzzle, it's usually during some sort of changing of thoughts or passing through notions, and at the very end of the game, you get trapped in that puzzle.
Yeah.
Right before the epilogue, and it's like this scary moment, and he actually says something along the lines of, "It's nice here, it's actually, it's really nice here in the darkness," and it's very strange. What do you guys think that puzzle means? Because he emphasizes that it has importance. So what's the meaning of the puzzle then?
Go, Lewis.
Okay, you want me because I have kind of a
Either of
disappointing
you.
answer? I don't think it means
Yeah.
anything. Like, a lot of
Okay.
this game is sort of asking, how much is it worth looking into this? How much can you actually figure out from a person? And my answer is, I don't think that puzzle says anything. It's like you can take it sort of at face value and come to a really interesting conclusion, and then just say, what is its use? What is the things around that puzzle that have meaning?
Yeah.
Like, he keeps ascribing meanings to this. Like, the dark space is... I don't even remember what he said, but Davey does have an interpretation, but I think, no, there's no interpretation.
You see, I have to disagree with you on that, and also with Davey, because like he keeps on giving you interpretations about the room, but like one thing that he never mentions, and this is like what's really weird to me, is that if you think about it, it is a room where when you first open it, you see that it's dark, right? And if you like peek in and have a look, you see that it's a dead end, right? And to solve that puzzle, you have to push yourself into a incredibly impossible situation where it's a dead end, and it's like it's literally a room where you won't be able to leave. So like it's sort of like taking a risk to move forward there and like lock yourself into that room. But by doing that, you're again like that risk is being rewarded by you actually finding out that other switch and being able to move forward.
Yeah.
So like maybe
Risk
it
and
might not be,
reward?
yeah, it is exactly risk and reward, right? And it's like a typical game development thing that we do. Like we force the player to take a risk, and like if they do, they beat the boss, they get the nice shiny armor they like, right? But
Yeah.
like when you play it, and like obviously I didn't have this thought at first when you play the first level where the puzzle is just introduced, because when you solve it, you get into that dark room, and then that's it. But then when he shows you everything else that's behind it, then that kind of clicks for me, and I'm like, this is exactly risk and reward. Even if it might have not been designed as it.
It's interesting
very
that you're talking
interesting
about that as sort of like having to take a risk to solve it. Because I was thinking, actually, in the very first level, that the game feels very engineered. That it's trying to make you believe that it's made by this like one independent guy.
Yeah.
But you can tell just based on the quality that it doesn't. And I was thinking in that Counter-Strike level, I was like, this doesn't feel like it's made by an amateur because I can't get out. Like, there's a whole set of blocks that look like, oh, you could maybe jump on top of them and get out, but it's set just carefully enough that it looks like you could, but you can't.
Yeah.
And I realized now that, like, if that wasn't the case, if there was some way to completely break, parts of that game, that puzzle would completely break, because you would think, oh, that would actually trap me and I would be stuck. But instead, the game has such a high quality that you say, oh, they would never actually let me get stuck.
Because you know that regardless of what happens, Davey's just gonna, oh, here's a door.
Yeah.
He's gonna change
you
the
don't
game.
know
and
that
help
when
out.
you do it for the first time.
That is true. I'm not gonna lie. The first time I did it, and I was thinking, I was like, oh crap, I hope I'm not doing this wrong and locking myself in here.
Yeah, exactly. That's the feeling that I had when I like opened it and closed it and ran in. I was like, I hope that I'm not gonna have to reload the level, right? Because that's what happens. There are games that actually do this to you. They do like a horrible move to you.
Mario Maker.
There's yeah.
But again, I think the difference is I felt like the quality was too high to let you do that. I mean, Portal's a good example of that. The original Portal game, there's a number of ways to get yourself trapped, but anytime you do,
Really?
GLaDOS just says, oh, here, I'll let you through, or I'll get you unstuck. And this
I
game
was
felt
thinking
very
like
similar to that.
I was thinking you were meaning like breaking the game, like stuck. Like I'm like, huh? Like what do you mean? But that's also like intentional design, right? You're supposed to feel trapped in a situation like that.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I just think I think that both sides of the argument, both the puzzle meaning nothing and the puzzle meaning everything, are very interesting. Because I lean more towards Mike's side of it means something. I can't quite put my finger on what. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Maybe it's the feeling trapped in creative expression. Maybe it's the chance of maybe you won't be able to move forward if you take this risk. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I could go do this, but I might die, type thing. And that's to me that's a very interesting feeling. And I think that whether it means nothing or maybe it means something, I've just completely walked in a circle. I think the puzzle's very interesting.
I want to talk about that feeling trapped thing though. So
Shoot, go ahead.
this is like when you do that puzzle, right? That's when you're going to be trapped for the first time. But I
Yes.
think it's a recurring sort of thing because I think even before it, in the spaceship, the labyrinth, you're being trapped. The puzzle, you're being trapped, and then as you move on, all the prison levels, the actual descent level, which by the way I want to talk about in addition to this, but like if you when when you get to the part where there's a prison in it, and as you're moving forward, you have the rails sort of getting in your way and stuff, and then at that part where you actually have to move on the side and go up, the rails are in your way and you have no option but to move up. But the name of the level is Descend. Everything up to that point is you just going down, and then you get to that part and you try to rise up and you end up in a prison for an hour. Well, in the non-modified version of it, but
Well,
Yeah,
it's
and
I want to just mention something on that real quick because the idea of kind of Davey saying like, oh, in this original game you'd be in here for an hour, but we don't, let's just skip all that.
yeah,
And then he goes on to make the Stanley Parable where you have to push a button for 4 hours to get a certain ending. I thought that was kind of contradictory.
well, I think that kind of like rings back to that joke, right? Like that might be him trying to like do a reference back to his other game as well, and like for people who've played it,
Yeah,
maybe.
maybe.
I mean, what do we think the prisons mean? Because let's see, we've talked about who the character Coda is. Is Coda perhaps his depression, his mind, whatever's going on in his head? We've talked about the puzzle. We've talked about what exactly the game means in general. What do we think the prisons mean? Because the prisons to me are the exact opposite of the puzzle that you can move through, the risk that has a reward at the end because you get to progress. What does the concept of being trapped mean to you guys?
I think it's just his view and reaction of what will happen if he goes on and moves forward, and like that's like again not just the prisons but also the labyrinths and the impossible labyrinth that you get into that in the level where you have to skip it with the bridge. It's just that the fact that he might be getting in it stuck in his own head, right?
Yes.
And it's like, first of all, I can't create, but also, do I move forward? Do I take a turn? Do I change this? Do I change that? Am I happy with this, basically? And it's like the constant feeling of just not being able to move forward. That's what it is to me. That's how I feel about it. But
And an interesting thought right after you go through the prison, the very first prison game, when you're trapped, and you get out and you talk to the NPCs, and they basically ask, how do you get out? It's like, oh, you go out the door. And then you go out the door. You then go through a number of other prison games, and the narrator mentions that he used to have arguments with Coda, because he says, this is the point when I knew him best. And they used to have very heated arguments about what was considered acceptable in game design. So what was playable and what wasn't. And he says that Coda, or claims the character Coda, sent him a folder just entitled Playable Games. And all of these playable games were just empty boxes that you couldn't escape from.
Yeah.
And it was basically just kind of arguing what is okay and what it isn't okay in game design, which almost leads me to believe that maybe there's another level to this. Maybe he's talking about modern game design being too flat.
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe, I don't know.
I don't know. It brings up a lot of topics, but doesn't seem to take a side on a lot of them.
That's actually a very interesting statement, because the interesting thing about this game is it makes you wonder what the hell is going on, and then sometimes it's kind of stuck in the middle between everything's happening here or nothing is happening here, and you don't really know what to look at. And I guess that's why we're here talking about it, because it's an interesting game. And when you have something that's interesting, you want to sit down and discuss it. I mean, obviously, for the people listening in, I would highly recommend playing through the game so that you can maybe catch up yourself. The game that we are talking about, once again, for those of you just tuning in right now, is The Beginner's Guide, from the writer of the Stanley Parable. It's a fantastic little game, pretty cheap on Steam. And I highly recommend that you guys all take a look at that game on Steam. Does anybody here have any final thoughts? Do we want to just straight up discuss the ending now? Because I don't think we've done that.
I mean, there's one thing I wanted to... I had one thing I wanted to quickly mention that wasn't really related to anything else, which was towards the beginning of the game, actually on that downwards one, Davey says something about the engine influencing the game. And he was mentioning that this was made with the Source engine, and that there's a lot of things like the boxy exteriors that seem based on it. And I had a thought later, when you actually have the gun and you're trying to destroy all the scenery, and I was thinking like, yeah, this definitely isn't Unreal Engine, because I had actually used the Unreal Engine 4 editor, and if you want to have something where you destroy it, you can have really good effects of it like crumbling and having physics objects moving around and everything. And when this game, where it just disappears, I was like, yeah, this is definitely not Unreal Engine.
Alright, you mean Source.
Well, I'm saying it's not Unreal Engine.
Oh, Unreal, yeah.
Although, I mean, it could have been done for effect.
I don't know enough about Source or game engines in general to be able to go along with that. I can say that most Source games appear to be kind of similar because of how Source is coded. Like, for example, Doors and Source games all look the same. Mike, do you have any final thoughts? Things that you wanted to talk about?
I did just think about something, but I think I forgot. It's fine. I think we can go into like what we thought about the end of the game.
What we thought about the end of the game?
Yeah.
Because, okay, so at the end of the game, you encounter this tower, and there's a bunch of insurmountable obstacles. There's, as we mentioned earlier on, there's a maze which teleports you back, which the narrator has to put a bridge over. There's a few other insurmountable obstacles, and as you climb up this tower, Davey the narrator starts talking about how his Coda disappeared. He vanished. And he started to share the games around to show them to people and say, look, this is amazing. And then Coda contacts him and basically just says, you've ruined games for me. I can't do this anymore. You have shown them to other people, and it is no longer possible for me to create games. Goodbye. And he vanishes. And then at the very end of the game, the narrator quite literally just states, I am putting all of these together into this pack. I'm putting it up for people to play so that hopefully the character Coda will come back. Now, I think that we've kind of, if not unanimously agreed, we've kind of come up with the concept of Coda is in his mind, right? If Coda is a fictional character, what did he make leave by passing these around? Like, what happened? Mike, what do you think?
I don't know. It's yeah, I mean, very open-ended sort of thing. I'm sorry, just one second. It's gonna mess up the screen. I forgot to mute my Skype, and this is making annoying sounds.
Skype is breaking, guys. You know, it's live stuff. You know, it happens. Let's continue, Mike.
So yeah, I just feel that it's the fact that he wanted to create games that were
Cat.
something that he imagined, and then the more he played them, he gets to the point when he's like, I don't think I want to finish this game. I don't like it. I don't like what it looks like, and it's again he's getting in his own head, and he says like he had a folder. He renamed his recycle bin into like very important games, and he would just drop everything there, right? And so that's like, I don't want to share this with other people. And I think like, so if it's a feeling, if it's the creativity, if it's the how he feels about himself and his creations, he's making his drive to create go away by reinforcing his fears, right? So this is the thing, right? Because he says I don't want to share the games. They're just for you. I want you to see them, and if that's the feeling, that's like in his mind, his creativity. He wants to
He's
he
creating
wants to
things for
evaluate himself. Yeah, but then like that's it. And by showing them, it's his biggest fear, right? It's what's gonna happen when when I've shown these games, and even if he gets positive feedback, which the narrator says all of these games are getting very positive feedback, in his mind, he's all just thinking about the negatives. So he's just building a wall inside of his head, stopping his creativity, increasing the fear, increasing the depression. Although he says, I'm not depressed, you're the one who's depressed, right?
Which is interesting because he's claiming, or because Coda, the character, is claiming, I'm not depressed, you're the one that's depressed. He's fighting with himself at that point.
And, it's like
he's fighting with himself.
Yeah,
I've had issues with depression in the past.
Right, the inner conflict happens at the end with that last game, and what he made go away is his passion for making games.
Yeah,
and he wants that to come back
by forcing his creativity too much, and he's hoping that by putting this, if what he's saying is true, and if what we are agreeing on is true, and in fact, then he's putting this up to hopefully encourage himself to begin to make games again. What do you think, Lewis?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, if that's the interpretation, that, Coda is supposed to be a part of...
Don't mind the cat butt.
the narrator, then... Get off me. Okay, continue. Sorry, I was having some audio issues, so I'm not 100% sure what you were talking about, but...
we're discussing just to get you caught up, we're discussing the end of the game and how the character Coda leaves, theoretically. And then where he says that I'm putting this out to the world to hopefully bring back that character. That's what we're discussing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, now talking, hearing your argument, I kind of have to agree with you that it's a part of Davy, or, sort of this is a part of the narrator. And in which case...
Go on. Sorry.
In which case, yeah, it does make sense that this is sort of like trying to re-inspire the narrator to keep making games. I don't know, it's kind of interesting.
What did you think the character Coda was when you were playing through? Because I remember you were quite conflicted on what to think initially. So if you were conflicted on what to think, what did you think that character... Who do you think that character was?
Well, I never really came to that sort of idea of maybe Coda isn't actually a person. Like, I was just thinking, okay, Coda is another person, but maybe more in the sense of representationally. Like, I thought the lens we were seeing it through, which was Davies, was the... was kind of where things started getting really... where a lot of those distinctions and those irregularities came from. But that there's supposed to be an actual Coda...
yeah.
I don't know.
So you were thinking of Coda as a person then?
Yeah.
Because from very early on in the game, I stumbled on, at least in my head, the conclusion of Coda being a fictional character, which I find very interesting because just reading the interpretations page on the Wikipedia, because that's something I like doing when I'm doing research, is I go to Wikipedia, and it's literally like spot on with my thought of Coda being a fictional character. The other, because it has two interpretations here on Wikipedia. The second one, sorry, Mike, is basically saying It's interpreted as a commentary between the role of a video game developer and their audience. So Coda is the developer and Davey is the audience in the other interpretation. Go ahead, Mike. You were going to say something and I interrupted you totally.
No, sorry. I was just trying to think if Coda is a separate character, right? If this is somebody else and not the narrator, not the game designer, right? Not like if it's either a fictional character who's a separate, or if it's an actual person who they're trying to embody in this character. I think that sort of interpretation wouldn't really work well, because like you couldn't believe that this person, that the narrator would go through all this trouble of saying, I know that I've hurt you. You've told me explicitly that I've messed you up by sharing your games. So to fix this, I'm going to share more of your games and a story with it. So hopefully that will do it, right? But if that was the case, I mean, I'm pretty certain that the Coda person would not respond to him, because he's doing more against his wishes, and just I don't know.
Yeah, which is why I end up kind of coming to the conclusion that the narrator is not necessarily the kind of guy you want to root for in the story.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got problems. I mean, nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
Totally fair.
That breakdown at the end of the game, though, is just wow.
That breakdown's incredibly powerful, and it's the reason that I think everybody should play that game.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to bring up is the laser. In the second game that you play through back at the I know we jump around a lot, but the second thing that you walk through, there's a point when you're in a spaceship. It's one of the first games that Coda created, and it's clearly very buggy and stuff. And you walk into this laser to supposedly blow up or stop the explosion of the station from happening and everybody dying. Assuming there's people on the station. But the game breaks, and instead of dying, you weirdly float up into space, and you can see through the world, and you basically glitch through the wall. And the narrator said that this inspired Coda to continue on and do more abstract creations. And then at the very, very, very end of the game, the last thing you see is a lamppost, which I guess Davey was adding to the games that Coda was creating, and that was upsetting the either the game developer character of Coda. And at the very, very end is another one of these lasers, and you float up into space, and it's just a maze beneath you.
Yeah.
And that moment in the game, at least for me, regardless of what that meant, because I that's the one part of the game that I don't understand, is the very end when you walk in that laser. Is it just there for effect? What is that maze? Is that maze the concept of creative expression? Is that depression? What is that?
I feel like to try to understand that very last shot, I'm going to call it a shot, you have to understand the entire epilogue. And there's a lot going on in there that's worth analyzing. You can tell that there's a lot in there that is inspired by Coda, but without it feeling like Coda. There's a lot of things like kind of the blocky rooms, the way certain corridors lead into another.
Hey, stop. Cat's being bad. I can't stop it, and it's frustrating. I'm gonna kill you, animal.
Do you want me to switch to BRB screen and you can just go?
No, we're good. Keep going. It's all good. We're almost done here anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I kind of finished my thought, but what did you think, Mike? What did you think about the entire epilogue, and particularly that last shot?
Yeah, so I was just gonna say that. To me, it didn't feel like it was a Coda game. It had that connection with him, and it was inspired heavily by him, but it was just like he added this part just to close off this pack and to have that sort of like a walk away story. But also, I don't know. I mean, it did make sense in the end. It wasn't. I don't know. I didn't find it confusing. I thought the ending of it, the laser, was a nice detail, because it references to that first sort of real game that he made. It was the end of that game, and so it's the end of this collection of the games that we're playing.
See, because to me, the epilogue was the most confusing part of the game.
Yeah.
That was the whole part that didn't make any sense to me. I didn't get that bit. I was just like, I played through it and I was like, what? And even the second time, I'm still like, what? Like, is this another game? Like, is this something that Davey created?
But to me, the laser bit, you know, like how he says in that second game that you play, when he says what you felt is what like is expected. But when you think about it, we play so many games in which the main character sacrifices himself that we as an audience don't even think about the fact, oh, I'm gonna go kill myself to save all these people, or don't think about it as doing something noble, or don't feel that as you know, death part of the game. It's just like, oh, it's a puzzle, I'm gonna solve it by walking into it, that's it, done, I finished the game, right? And so the effect of the bug that you float up and see that puzzle, and then the ending of the epilogue where you float up and see the massive maze, it's just much more powerful than that normal death scene that he was going for in that first game. But again, it just brings back to the being stuck in your own head, and all the puzzles, all the prisons, all the mazes, is the fact that you see that massive maze in the end. So I don't know.
Yeah, no. Overall, it's a very interesting game, which I would definitely recommend everybody play. To those of you just tuning in, this is the StoryMode podcast. It's a podcast where we sit down after playing through a game all of us have played, and we talk about it for the better part of an hour. And I think we're coming up on the end here, actually. In fact, we're almost exactly on an hour. So does anybody here have any final thoughts? Even if it's just how episode 1 went. What do you guys think?
Do you want to start, Mike?
Yeah. I'll just repeat what I've been saying for an hour. This game is very confusing, right? And it's amazing at the same time, and it's such a great story and such a great narrative. So, like, if you guys haven't played it, go play it. And as for the episode of this, I've enjoyed it. I had fun talking to you guys, so let's do this again.
And I'll go next. Yeah, most of you probably know me. In fact, all of you know me. I'm blind. This is my channel. I host this channel, and this is my new podcast, which will be airing once a month, starting now. Which is, I really hope that everybody here has enjoyed it so far. Yeah, I think it's gone quite well. And I hope to do more episodes on this. And Lewis, do you have any final thoughts?
Just that I think the game, it's really good. I enjoy it, and I like that we could talk about this and come up with very different interpretations, and I think that marks a really good game. As for the podcast, went really well. I like talking to you guys. Feel like we talked about some interesting stuff.
I think I'm gonna monologue for a moment here. I had a moment a number of years back. Some of you may remember Portal 1 was given away for free on Steam. Now, ironically, this is the same day that me and Lewis both registered Steam accounts. I didn't have a Steam account because my internet was bad. All the games that I owned were owned on disc. I didn't have any Steam-connected games. And so that was when I bought a Steam account. I got a Steam account specifically to get Portal for free, because there was no free games on Steam at that point. There was no free-to-play section or anything. So I had Portal, and I played through Portal. I beat it in one day. The next day, I talked with my friend about that game for like 3 hours. And I've never had that moment since. I've never been able to sit down with a group of people and just discuss a game. So that is why I wanted this podcast to exist, so that we could just play through and hopefully recreate that once a month and just sit down and have an awesome discussion about a game. It's been a lot of fun. So I think we're pretty much done here now. Awesome.
Okay.
To everybody here watching live, we're gonna go to the end screen now. Once the end screen starts, that's about when that's when the audio version and the video version will end. And to those of you here live right now, we're going to go and play some Duck Game after this, I think. It's going to be all of us. You're going to see all of our faces on here. We're still going to be playing multiplayer. We're actually going to start interacting with the chat and the audience. So thank you to everybody who tuned in. It was a fantastic show. Everybody, let's just say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.